the roles and responsibilities of student trustees in preparation for their place in September. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Director Dawson, and welcome to our new student trustees. Now we would like to begin with our opening prayer, national anthem, and oath of citizenship. So we'll ask Trustee Anna Maria to lead us.
A prayer for the 7th week of Easter. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. This is the final week of the Easter season. We are guided all week by the story of Paul's journey all the way to Rome. The final words of Jesus to his apostles, and to us, fill this week. They are comforting. His deep desire for unity amongst us is powerful. They prepare us to hear him praying to the Father for us. It is a week in which we can intensify and deepen our prayer for the coming of the Holy Spirit on Pentecost. We can ask for the grace all week to be open to the Spirit's coming and work in our lives. Mighty God, in whom we know the power of redemption, you stand among us in the shadows of our time. As we move through every sorrow and trial of this life, uphold us with the knowledge of the final morning, when, in glorious presence of your risen Son, we will share his resurrection, redeemed and restored to the fullness of life, and forever freed to be your people. Amen.
Thank you, Trustee Anna Maria. That was lovely. Thank you. I would now like to ask the Vice Chair to give us, please, the motions adopted in camera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the May 2018 special in-camera board meeting, the following motion was adopted in camera. Resolved, the Halton Catholic District School Board of Trustees sanctioned Trustee Michael for a breach of the Trustee Code of Conduct, and that she be removed from the Discipline Committee for the remainder of the term, November 30th, 2018, as well as from the 2018 Director of Education search from the beginning to the end of the hiring process, and that Trustee Michael be barred from attending 2 public board meetings, and that Trustee Michael may attend regular in-camera meetings of the board.
Thank you, Vice Chair Murray. We will have more information, but we have not finished our in-camera meeting yet, so that may be next week. With regard to approval of the agenda, are there any additions to the agenda, please? All right, can I have a mover, please? Trustee Intomasi, seconded by Trustee Trites. Any questions? No? All in favor? Thank you very much. A declaration of conflict of interest? None? Thank you. Presentations. 4.1, the 2018 Educational Development Charges EDC bylaw renewal, public meeting. Superintendent Ngoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Initially, the purpose of this public meeting was also to pass the bylaw. However, due to the election, the ministry has requested to defer the approval until after the election. For us, that means that the Board of Trustees will approve the bylaw at the June 19th meeting. And with the bylaw will take effect in this case on the June 25th. I would like to pass it on to our guest, Mr. Jack Amendolia of Watson and Associates, and Mr. Brett Teichman of Overland to walk us through today's public meeting presentation.
Thank you. Welcome, gentlemen, as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the board for having us here again tonight. As was mentioned by Superintendent Ngoy, initially the public meeting tonight was to consider passage of the bylaw, but as was discussed, due to the election, the ministry notified us and the boards that they would not be approving any bylaws before the June election and that approvals would occur after. So just to start out tonight, for the benefit of the trustees and the public, just want to go through a quick timeline of our correspondence and communication with the ministry, just to ensure that we've followed all regulatory guidelines in terms of what we'd had to provide to the ministry. So the Ministry of Education was originally notified, I think back in the winter of 2017, that the boards would be renewing their EDC bylaws, and the bylaws would be, or planned to be renewed on or around May, June of 2018, and that the bylaws actually expired in June 2018. The ministry, just so everyone is aware, and the Minister of Education is responsible for approving the EDC background study. The estimates of the enrollment projections and the number of sites have to be approved by the Minister of Education prior to a board being able to pass that bylaw. They must be given 40 days, 40 business days, clear business days, to review that background study. As a courtesy, we also often contact the Ministry of Education in advance of those 40 days, just to let them be aware that we're producing this background study, just so they can be proactive and let their staff know that something's coming down the pipe. So that was done as well. And in the case of this bylaw, knowing that it was bumping up against the provincial election, we were even more proactive than typically, just to make them aware of what was happening. The boards were assured, so we can tell the trustees and the public that at that time of contact, the boards were assured by the ministry, by the Business Services branch, that the election shouldn't have any issue with regard to receiving approvals on time. The background study itself was provided to the Ministry of Education on March 15th, 2018. So we had 42 business days for review, so exceeded that 40 business day legislative requirement. At that time, they were also provided with all public meeting dates and consideration of passage dates. The ministry confirmed receipt of that email and the study by emailing us back on March 19th, 2018. We then contacted the ministry again about a month after that, just to see how the review was going. We didn't receive feedback at that time. In addition, after that initial contact, board staff was in touch with one of the ministry analysts reviewing the study. Feedback was that everything was going along. We had no feedback that there was going to be any issue with receiving approvals prior to the election. We contacted them again May 7th, asking for a status update, and then I was contacted personally by the Director of Business Services by phone on May 8th, telling me that because of certain things that have come up with regard to EDC issues, and that it might be considered a bit of a sensitive topic prior to the election, that the Business Services branch was given direction by the ministry not to approve any EDC studies prior to the June election. He did assure me at the time that the EDC process, or the review of the background study, everything was proceeding normally, and that there shouldn't be any issues in terms of getting that signature and getting that approval immediately after the June election. So that's the update with regard to what's going on with ministry approvals and the communication that we had with them. Just before we I sort of finish my piece. There's just a few things that, as part of this EDC public meeting, that I wanted to quickly go over and review, again, for the benefit of the public and the trustees. So just again, we've talked about this at the previous public meeting, so just a quick summary of some of the elements of the EDC, or the Education Development Charge. So the EDC itself is a bylaw. It's adopted under the Education Act. And what's important to note is that it enables recovery of growth-related net education land costs only. So the money is used to buy sites for new schools, to prepare those sites, to build new schools, but not for any construction of those schools. Not all boards qualify for EDC, so you do have to meet an eligibility trigger, which this board does. EDCs may be uniform across a jurisdiction or area specific. This board's existing bylaw is applied on a jurisdiction-wide basis, so that means the same charge is applied across the board's jurisdiction. The EDC may be a single charge for all types of development, or it could be a differentiated charge. That means that whether you're building a low, medium, or high-density house, a single-family condo, the EDC can be the same across all those types of development, or it could be differentiated depending on different types of development. Your existing bylaw, again, is uniform for all types of development. And the boards have the ability to allocate education land costs to both residential development and non-residential development. The legislation says boards can allocate anywhere from 0% to 40% to non-residential. Your board has a 90-10 split. So 90% of your EDC costs are borne by residential development, so housing, and 10% are borne by non-residential development. So that would be commercial, industrial types of development. And that 90-10 split is pretty much an average across the province. And then some requirements that have to be met before a board can pass a bylaw. So the board consultants, so Watson & Associates, prepared an EDC background study and included the necessary requirements. That's been done. The background study was made available to the public at least 2 weeks prior to the first public meeting. That has also been done. Legislatively required public meetings and notice of all public meetings must be given a clear 20 days before those meetings. So notice was published in newspapers 20 days before the first public meeting that we had back in April, and this is now the third public meeting that we're having tonight. The EDC background study itself, as I mentioned earlier, had to be provided to the ministry at least 40 days prior to bylaw consideration. So it was provided 42 days before tonight, but being that now the bylaw is not going to be considered until June, it was well beyond that 40 days. Then the last point that I have shaded, EDC background study has not yet received Ministry of Education approval that we just discussed. So that's that final requirement that must be met prior to the board being able to pass the bylaw. Next, I want to quickly go over some of the feedback that was received. So in addition to the public meetings, I mentioned at the last public process that we also had a stakeholder information session that was had for municipalities, regional officials, as well as BUILD, which represents many of the developers across the region. At that information session, we did receive some feedback, mainly from stakeholders. The trustees and the board did receive a memo from BUILD outlining certain issues. We responded to that memo on May 8th, 2018, and then just today we received a response from BUILD that I think was also passed out to trustees, agreeing largely with many of the issues that we had discussed through the public process. They did raise a couple of outstanding issues, but in their letter they mentioned that it's something that they would readdress with us or with the board at the next bylaw process in 5 years. So no major outstanding issues to report with regard to this bylaw, at least from BUILD's position. And then finally, just before I finish off, just some staff recommendations. So in between now and your next meeting where you're actually going to consider bylaw passage in June, staff will provide the board trustees with a report that will outline a lot of the issues that I discussed here tonight and at the first public meeting, mainly with regard to some of the policies. And some of the major policies are what I mentioned tonight. So jurisdiction-wide EDC is likely to be the recommendation unless we receive public input or feedback to the contrary. That's how your existing EDC is applied. Uniform rate across all types of development, and likely staying with a 90% residential, 10% non-residential allocation.
In that report, could you provide some information on what potential changes would mean? I know you presented to us saying, well, most boards do this, no reason to change. But if we went to 85-15, what would that mean?
That's all in the background study already. So in the background study and the cash flow analysis, we do a sensitivity analysis that shows what the residential and non-residential charge would be, everywhere from 0% all the way up to 40%. So all those options are provided for you in the background study.
And I had asked you questions about switching from, I asked you about square footage, but you indicated there was a high rise, there was medium density and low density. And I see that Build has asked about that as well in their letter, asking if we would reconsider defining high density housing to be included in stacked townhouses.
Yeah, so so stacked townhouses right now, depending on the growth, so we basically follow what the municipality does in their residential growth forecast. So what our response was to Build was to highlight or isolate stacked townhouses and move those to a high density category. We just didn't have enough information to do that across all of the region of Halton. What they said in their response is that some municipalities are starting to define stacked townhouses in the high density category, and that in the next bylaw process in 5 years, the idea is hopefully we may have more information with regard to those stacked townhouse units and how they're defined, and we may be able to put those into a high density category at that time.
So your recommendation, other than increasing the rate, is to keep everything exactly the same?
Just to be clear, it's not my I don't, as a consultant, I don't make recommendations to the board. Staff will make recommendations to the trustees, but ultimately it's a trustee decision on the various policies within the bylaw.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Who amongst our staff is providing this recommendation then? It'll be Fred?
Roxana?
Yes, I will bring it forward and...
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from trustees? No? Okay, Roxana? No, that's it.
Unless there's any further questions.
Can I just add one thing? Madam Chair, thank you. So I understand we've heard that because the ministry is not giving out approvals, and the approvals are a condition precedent to pass the bylaw, we can't pass the bylaw tonight. So we anticipate receiving ministry approval after the election, and I understand the board will be considering that. So after they receive the approval, the board will be considering passage of the bylaw on June 19. So under the legislation, the bylaw comes into force no sooner than 5 days after it's passed. So June 19 is a Tuesday, 5 days later is the 24th. 24th is I've got 24th is a Sunday, and so the bylaw would come into force the following Monday, the next business day, which would be the 25th. The current bylaw, which only has a 5-year term, expires June 23rd, the end of the day, June 23rd, that's a Saturday. So no building permits are issued over the weekend, of course. So although there's going to be a 1-day gap in bylaws, there'll be no gap in collections because it's fortunately falling on Saturday and a Sunday. So the bylaw, the new bylaw, if the board passes it on the 19th, comes into force on Monday, June 25. And I can advise the board that the public board is meeting tomorrow night to deal with the same hiccup in the process because of the ministry decision not to issue approvals. And Jack and I will be speaking to them in order to ensure it's coordinated, like to have both bylaws, in order to ensure both bylaws come into force on the same day, so it's administratively easier for the boards in the area municipalities that collect the charges. So anyways, there'll be no gap in collections, which is good news.
Go ahead.
Chair Rabenda, what if a new education minister doesn't process the approvals in a timely fashion?
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I actually spoke with the department, and they've been given rights to approve that without minister approval. So they don't have to name the education minister. The staff have been given approval to do that immediately after the election.
Thank you, Trustee Quinn.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. If our meeting is delayed or the bylaw is not passed, could we extend the current bylaw?
No,
Or it statutorily has to come to an end?
yes, through you, Madam Chair, it's 5-year maximum. There's no ability to extend it. It has to be a new, fresh bylaw.
Any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much, gentlemen, as always. Thank you. Will we see now we're on to delegations 5.1, moral decision making in Catholic teaching, Dr. McQueen and Mr. O'Brien.
Okay, sorry. My name is Tim O'Brien. When Dr. McQueen mentioned the Catholic teaching on cooperation in evil, a teaching which I knew little about, I saw that it could throw some light on resolving the sanctity of life motion. Dr. McQueen.
Okay. Thank you. Pleasure to be here. You can see the title, and I have to say right at the beginning, I'm just really going to talk about Catholic teaching. I'm not really on either side, as it seems to have turned out in this particular motion. But Catholic teaching and moral decision making as it relates to financial support of anything to do with either embryonic or adult stem cell research. And so, first of all, in any decision, MD has to make knowledge of the facts as clearly of first importance. So first of all, is there clear evidence that some organizations are pursuing embryonic stem cell research? And secondly, do they pursue only stem cell research or also adult stem cell research? And just very briefly about adult stem cells, because I believe there's been some confusion just factually about this kind of information, that adult stem cells are retrieved from different parts of the body. That's not right. So they're obtained from the umbilical cords, and they're obtained to be used by people as autologous stem cell treatments. And there is a difference in terms of how that actually works. There are new stem cells that are being used that are called pluripotent stem cells, where most research is actually being done that are induced. They're actually, in a sense, retroactive from adult stem cells, almost all the way to becoming embryonic stem cells, but are not because of different chemical factors. With embryonic stem cell research, that they're only done, as everybody knows, on unused embryos made through in vitro fertilization. Parents actually have to give consent before they can be used, and again, we all know that the embryo dies when these stem cells are extracted for experimental purposes. It's been interesting that adult stem cells have been much more successful than anybody expected, including the researchers and scientists. There's a great list of successes, and this is ongoing. I did attach an article I wrote about successes, cures, treatments derived from adult stem cells with the transcript that I submitted. I have some copies here if anybody is interested in it. Part of the problem that adult stem cells have been, again, more successful than expected, but there have been several problems with using embryonic stem cells. The main one being that so far, even in mice treatment, because most of the experimentation is done in mice, tumors have been formed, therefore causing almost more problems than the potential treatment to be gained from anything developed from the embryonic stem cells themselves. And also, there is a need for ongoing drugs that would then be necessary throughout a person's life to counter the body's rejection of tissues. And that particular type of treatment medication has its own problems in terms of medical implications for people who might in the future receive embryonic stem cell treatments. And neither of these problems occur with adult stem cells. It helps if I go the right direction, doesn't it? So, we know that many organizations are involved in both types of research, embryonic and adult, and it's very clear in Catholic teaching that Catholics cannot support embryonic stem cell research. Is it possible, though, at the same time to morally support adult stem cell research, and how can this be done? This principle that's called cooperation in evil is very much part of Catholic teaching. I think it's a little understood element in Catholic teaching, but it is a basic principle for decision making. And it does imply involvement in an area that has an element of wrongdoing, because it's clear that very often good and evil together just appear together, and both of them are really unavoidable. If you want to achieve a good action, sometimes there is an evil component. It's very interesting to me that our Catholic Church does not withdraw from all organizations, but it does not approve of all the actions. And so I'm suggesting here that the Holy See, for example, is a member of the United Nations. And as such, it's party to what the United Nations decides. It's party to the financial obligations that member countries in United Nations are involved in. But it clearly supports some motions and rejects others. It usually rejects all motions that have to do with reproductive rights, as they're called, which include things like abortion, in vitro fertilization, all those particular acts. But it doesn't withdraw from the United Nations itself. It believes that if it stays, it has witness value in being a voice for peace and justice. So in terms of the principles in cooperation, they're very broad principles. There's actually no official teaching. By that I mean magisterial teaching directly from the popes, etc., on how to navigate these specific areas of mixed involvement. We have very broad principles that all Catholics are aware of, such as protecting life from conception until natural death. And we understand those in the broadest sense. But we also realize that the Church does not have rules for every single situation. And it leaves us to work out the details. For example, in this particular situation, which organizations to support. There is nothing specifically said anywhere in Catholic teaching about that. In a sense, it's at this micro level as opposed to the macro level where we're usually actually involved in teaching. So this idea of cooperation in evil, and I think even the title suggests that there's something different about this in Catholic involvement. There's formal cooperation and there's material cooperation. Formal cooperation first means that a board, for example, agrees with an organization's intention to pursue embryonic stem cell research, for example, and wishes their donations to be used for that purpose. And if that was what a board or a person or any donor actually thought, wished, did, then that would be considered to be the same morally as performing the actual embryonic stem cell research in that area of research, and that is not allowed in Catholic teaching. So this broad distinction, again, is called formal cooperation and material cooperation. Formal is definitely never allowed in Catholic teaching. Material cooperation, I think, is where it begins to become a little bit more difficult to navigate. So material cooperation would mean that, for example, again, a board does not agree with an organization's intentions as far as embryonic stem cell research is concerned, but that it would, in fact, assuming that there were a decision to go ahead and make a donation, that it would emphatically inform that organization of its opposition to this specific type of research, and would further state that it actually agrees only with research using adult stem cells. And in that situation, the wrong intention is not present in the same way as it is in formal cooperation. And the action is considered sufficiently removed from the wrong action to make it, yes, material cooperation in an area in which people in some ways would like to be not involved, perhaps, but because it's neither formal cooperation, you don't intend the purpose of the research, you're stating very clearly you're against the purpose of the research, but there is something else that you can support, then the intention would be only clearly, I think, for that secondary purpose, and sufficiently removed from the wrong action, which is why you can even have something that's called cooperation in evil. So the justification for material cooperation, again, has to be decided, just as has been happening in this board and in many other places for different activities. First of all, clearly a board always has the right to choose which organizations it will donate to. But funding an organization whose sole purpose is embryonic stem cell research would be wrong. That would be formal cooperation. But where the same organization also promotes research approved by the church, so for example, adult stem cell research, which is approved by the church, it can be supported, but only for that purpose. So I think there's a very clear distinction. I think the other very important area that always has to go in when people are thinking about these matters is that a board or an individual donor, I'm just saying board because I'm here, can ask that funds donated be restricted to a specific area of the organization. This is already possible. Many of us do it in many other organizations where this same approach, some areas of some organizations don't appeal to our conscience. So we can ask for funds to be restricted to the area that we do approve of. And it must make a witness statement to that organization explaining the moral reasons why it supports some research and not others. So there is a witness part. And many people talk about our purpose, our mission of evangelizing, which is what every Catholic actually has the moral obligation to do. And I think this is another area where this particular statement could be used intentionally as a way of evangelizing the organization itself and the public. But it does call for the donor or the board to be making these points very, very clearly if it does decide to go ahead with its purpose. Similarly, the organization itself has some responsibility to donors. It's not a one-way street because there would otherwise be simply an area of trust. So donors can ask, and I think should ask, an organization to explicitly state that the funds would be used only in research acceptable to church teaching. And then if that organization cannot or does not comply, then no funds should be given and alternative recipients sought. As alternative recipients should be sought any time, I think, in these situations. If there is a genuine alternative, I think for most people doing that same kind of research, for example, then it would make more sense to be pursuing that particular organization than anyone that causes even this kind of limited cooperation in evil. And I think donors, too, can ask for annual reports, for example, as happens with nearly all organizations, including my own, where restricted funds are given for specific duties and tasks and purposes, and showing how the money has actually been used. So very briefly finishing up, that in following Catholic teaching on cooperation in evil, and this is following Catholic teaching, it's not necessary to remove ourselves completely from some areas where there is mixed and good and evil. And a strategy for promoting the good and avoiding the evil has to be worked out in each different circumstance prudently, with responsibilities on both sides, and retaining oversight for further developments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. McQueen. Thank you. Trustees, do you have any questions? Excuse me. Any questions? Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay. We will be giving a response to the delegation, but it will come after the minutes, which will just be in a few minutes. So thank you very much, Dr. McQueen. Mr. O'Brien, thank you. All right, trustees, if we can go down, please, to number 6.1, minutes of the May 1st, 2018 regular board meeting. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Quinn, thank you. Seconded by?
No, Madam Chair, I had a question about one of the points.
Whoa. It's not on the table yet. Are you having a question about the minutes? Yes. Okay, we're not on the table yet. Can I have a mover, please, to get this on the table? Trustee Trice, seconded by Trustee Rowe. Okay, Trustee Quinn, your question.
Thank you. Number 9.2, transportation to advanced placement. I'm wondering if we could revisit my motion and ask Rosie to look at that again. I thought that I had asked for a little bit more information to come back to us on that, and not just received as information. So if we could just check the tape. That is a tape? I can recheck it, but that is. Okay, thank you. Right.
Okay. All right. Trustee Carabella.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. I also wanted to say on that particular point that I asked that it be marked down in the future on the business arriving from previous meetings. Okay, thank you.
All in favor? Thank you. Any opposed? Thank you. All right. So, going to the summary of outstanding items from the previous meeting. It is on page 48, and basically it's to do with education research and also student trustees on the board. All right? So the approval is amended. That will be done in the fall, and of course the education research we've been working on. Okay? Thank you. All right. So now we are back to 8.1, the response to the delegation. So, to our guests, in accordance with policy 1-06, delegation to the board, trustees may move a motion to 1, make a decision on the presentation at the same meeting, 2, refer the matter to a future meeting, 3, request a staff report on the matter to be considered at a future meeting, or 4, receive as information. So I open up the floor for any trustee motions regarding the delegation. Trustee Intomasi?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I would move to have it received as information and compiled in with the stakeholder feedback.
Okay. Do I have a seconder, please? Trustee Rowe, any questions or comments on the motion? All right, we'll do a count. Are we ready, Madam Director? Trustee Quinn?
In favor.
Trustee Anna Maria?
In favor.
Trustee Rowe?
In favor.
Trustee Christina?
In favor.
Trustee Danko?
In favor.
Vice Chair Murray?
In favor.
Trustee Trice?
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi?
In favor.
Trustee Ingrid?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
So thank you very much to our guests. Your presentation will be added to the stakeholder feedback, which is due to close on June 1st from the system and will be presented to trustees on the June 19th board meeting. Okay, so thank you very much. Really appreciate you coming. Moving right along here, it is 8.2, salary grid for senior officers. Trustee Quinn.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I brought this notice of motion at the last meeting to bring back the issue of the salary pay freeze and how it has uniquely affected our senior officers as opposed to all the other employees of our board. My interest in bringing this back is to have a discussion around the table as to what our responsibilities are as a board to upholding our contractual commitments to our staff. I was proud to support Trustee Marai's decision to hold the line fiscally with a 2.6% pay envelope increase for senior staff. But in my 3.5 years as trustee, I've seen and learned of other boards giving pay increases to their senior officers outside and around the freeze in the salary grid. And I think it's our responsibility to live up to the contractual obligations we have, not only with our vendors and with every other entity that we deal with, but also to our most senior staff, our management. So I'm putting this motion forward as an opportunity for discussion about how we deal with the salary grid freeze and how we attract and retain the best superintendents in our board by living up to our contractual commitments. So I'll read this resolution. Thank you. Whereas the Halton Catholic District School Board received ongoing funding from the Ministry of Education in relation to the commensurate salary grade movements of senior staff, but did not make payments according to the contract signed in good faith with board superintendents. Whereas other Ontario school boards have recently been obliged to repay those previously withheld amounts as required by the provincially mandated salary freeze following legal proceedings on behalf of the superintendents, and as our board wishes to avoid similar proceedings. Whereas the Halton Catholic District School Board wishes to reiterate our commitment to adhere to all contractual commitments made in good faith, be it resolved that the HCDSB retroactively repay all contractual obligations of salary grid compensation increases that were withheld to the senior officers of the board with interest of no greater than 5% per annum. Be it further resolved that staff provide supporting materials related to actions of the other school boards.
Thank you. A seconder? Trustee Intomasi. Thank you. Questions to the motion? Oh, did I miss something? Sorry, go ahead.
Well, as part of that resolution, now that we have a seconder, I'm gonna ask, if the Director of Education could provide some information on what the other school boards have done in this matter, and what the costs will be to our board, and what the potential costs could be if we go through litigation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just some background on the numbers. 14 school districts never ever did freeze salary grids. When the wage restraint came into effect in 2012. And for various reasons, there were another 3 boards who had frozen salaries but then restored them between 2012 and 2017. And 20 additional boards have now also restored grids based on the Keller opinion, which is the Hamilton-Wentworth opinion. And then that makes a total of 37 boards that have restored their grid. In addition to that, 15 boards of those have restored the grid and paid back lost salaries. 11 French boards, all the Catholic French boards, and 3 of the public French boards restored grids and paid back lost salaries, so that is a total of 26. So in total, 54 boards have done, out of 72, have done some action in this regard. And your second question, Trustee Quinn, what would be the cost to do this? It's $255,000 and $303. And probably, I can't guess for legal, if a lawsuit was launched, but I would imagine it takes longer in a lawsuit, so there would be more costs incurred. And this amount was booked as a liability on our books anyway. Thank you.
All right. Anything else, Trustee Quinn? Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead.
No, I'm quite all right with it as it is. I think this is something we should have done before, and if we weren't gonna give the 5%, I'm quite happy to do this here.
Thank you, Trustee Trites. And then Trustee Rowe, and then Vice Chair Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, Superintendent Nogoy, can you give us a close exact figure of what we put on the books as a liability, please? Just to update us.
At the year end, the estimate was around 270,000. So it's 270,000.
Thank you. Trustee Rowe.
My question's been answered. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a couple comments to this, and I want to thank Trustee Quinn for bringing it up because I think he's doing it with only good intentions. Part of the discussion on this I want to do in public, but there are a bunch of points that I would like to bring up in camera. I'd like the board to go in camera, so I'll ask that we go in camera because some of the information we've received in camera in the past, and I don't want to let out any confidential information, but it pertains to this issue specifically. So I'd ask that we go in camera to discuss a portion of this issue.
So are we going to then bring this back in camera, or are you asking everyone to evacuate the room now?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it an evacuation, but a pause for a few minutes because it pertains to legalities surrounding this motion.
All right. So I guess I apologize profusely. Could you give us the room for 5 minutes or so?
I'm sure we have to vote on that.
Pardon me?
Vote on
Sure,
that.
so I'll make a motion.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, before you leave, this is very unusual. All right.
Well, no, and I don't want to break confidentiality of information we received, so that's why I'm asking us to have a fulsome discussion. It's not inconvenient.
All right, well then, should we not just do it in in-camera session?
No, because I think the motion correctly came in public, which I can appreciate, but there's lots of issues where we can discuss some of it in public.
How long is this going to take?
About 10 minutes.
Not when it comes to salary. Okay, so do we have a mover to go into in camera first of all? One. A seconder? Two. Okay, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4. We do not go into in camera, so we will have to put this item on hold until we go into camera, and then come out of in camera and bring it back next meeting.
Point of order, Madam Chair. The request to move in camera was defeated, I believe.
Yes.
Therefore, we continue with this
Well,
item on the
you
table.
can continue on, but you can't talk as,
We can still have the vote.
pardon me, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. You first, go ahead.
We can still have the vote, Madam Chair. This
Yes.
motion is on the table with the seconder.
Yes,
And trustee Mariah asked to go in camera. The board
it
did
was
not approve
defeated.
that. Therefore, we continue with this motion as is.
Absolutely we can, but we can't discuss the confidential material that trustee Vice Chair Murray wants to discuss. Sorry, Anthony, did I? Hmm? Sorry, Anthony, go ahead.
No, thanks for recognizing me, Chair Amanda, but you've said what I was gonna say.
Okay. No problem carrying on, but you cannot divulge confidential information.
That's not a problem, and
Okay.
and I'll be careful not to, though I think it's
The couple that left, did they really leave, or are they outside? Fred, would you mind? This is very unusual. Coming back? Okay. All right, go ahead.
So the first question I would ask every trustee to ask themselves before they vote on this motion is, have you read the contracts of our superintendents as to what we agreed to? If you have not read the contracts of the superintendents or the boilerplate contract that the director signed with all of them, you shouldn't be agreeing to this, because we may or may not have provided them with this in the agreement. I'm going to talk, before this, I was worried that we wouldn't be able to go on camera, so I read the arbitration rulings that are public online, and I can speak to some of them. But first of all, I want to make the board aware that if we do vote for this motion, we would be in contravention of Bill 5, the Comprehensive Public Sector Compensation Act of 2013, and the Director of Education would have to inform the Ministry of Education of that contravention. And this motion comes down to, does that law, Bill 5, apply to this board or not? There have been 3 arbitration rulings on this, and what I will say to that, from what is public, is in the cases where boards were required to pay back the amounts, it was clearly illustrated in Bill 5 where those exceptions lie. Clearly illustrated why they had to be paid back. In the public case that is online on Google and is public and was put in a memo by one of our lawyers, where the board did not have to pay back, there were not any extenuating circumstances such as collective bargaining by the SOs. So in that case, which is public, the SOs collectively bargained, which the Act allowed, for the freeze not to actually take effect. And in that case, and potentially in other cases, the boards in question were under the supervision of the ministry. So and this is again public, was in the ruling was that the ministry cannot contravene itself. In both those instances where the arbitrations ruled in that way, it was on those specific items, and I would ask you to ask yourself, do those things actually apply to our board? And the final thing I will say is, if I did the research before this, I asked for permission to look at our boilerplate contracts, and I would ask you to do the same before you vote for such a motion. Further to that, it's also public knowledge that the majority of the individuals involved in this were hired after the law was passed, the wage restraint was passed, so it was public understanding that the wage constraint was in place at the time. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Quinn.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair, if I could ask Joe if he could tell me what became of the teacher's salary grid since the pay freeze and where that has led to now, and how much money teachers are out from the salary grid freeze to today.
Again, to the chair, there has been some litigation that's been happening with the province over the 97-day freeze. There's been some settlements that have happened with some of the unions, which has resulted in the ministry settling and paying monies to resolve those issues and to try to avoid further litigation. So some of those are certainly public record. Certainly the OECTA settlement, there was a CUPE settlement as well. So again, the ministry in doing some similar things around freezing grid movement, that was found to be illegal, and there were settlements that resulted in same. Thank you.
Thank you. And in following up to Trustee Mariah's remarks, I haven't seen any contracts with any staff members other than when I first was hired, and I asked the director if I could see her contract because I thought that was important, as she is our only employee. But other than that, I think that we are responsible for upholding all of our contracts written and signed in good faith with our staff and with our any partners we have, any stakeholders we have in this education business. So that's why I'm asking you to support this motion. Let's give them what they agreed to, what we agreed to pay them, and going forward, we can negotiate these contracts through the director according to our new employee, what's that called, Paul? Executive compensation policy. Thank you.
And respectfully, I understand your position that you think that we should fulfill what is in our contracts, but if you haven't, and I'm not saying you haven't, but if anyone hasn't read the contracts, you don't know if we were fulfilling it or not, and that's why we should oppose this motion. Thank you.
Just to follow up on some of the things that Trustee Marai said about contravention, and those boards who, all of those boards who chose to provide grid restoration or retro pay, because their contracts are very similar or identical, that is considered, legally, there is an opinion that you could be considered collective bargaining, which would be the exemption from, for that reason. And because our senior staff contracts are essentially identical, that's the case that can be made.
Thank you. Through Madam Chair, question to the director. So for all those boards that did do something, how is that initiated?
They would seek approval from their board to do that.
So the senior officers.
The director would bring that information forward to the board, and the board would pass a motion to do that.
Maybe through you, Madam Chair, I could ask the director why she hadn't brought it to our attention in the past.
Well, I think we were going through enough with the executive compensation, so we wanted to see where that landed, and we still haven't settled on that yet, so that is why it wasn't brought forward.
Are there any other questions, or are we ready for a vote? Vote. Trustee Danko?
Chair Abenda, I'd like to move that we postpone this motion indefinitely.
I think we have a motion on the floor right now.
Motion to postpone indefinitely can be brought up at this point like an amendment.
Well, since we no longer have our friend, all right, so we're going to have to look that up. That's what I told you this would happen, and that's what's going to happen.
Madam Chair, I'll second that motion.
You'll second that motion?
Have the vote, and we'll just see. it'll be the same result either way, I imagine, so.
No, we're gonna do this exactly as... No. We're gonna do this. I told you that this would happen if we did not have our friend. Where is it? I have the list. Okay. So you're just gonna have to wait. Okay. All right. So you wish to kill the main motion. This is what you wanted, and this is what you got. Okay, a seconder for that was Anthony. All right, you can debate that. Yes, you cannot amend that, and the vote is the majority. Okay, we're going to do this every single time. Okay? So we are at a point, we've got a mover, we've got a seconder, and is there any debate on that issue? Trustee Ian Tomasi.
If I'm understanding this correctly, Trustee Danko has a motion to postpone indefinitely, which means forever and ever, amen. And I would really like to see the original motion get voted on properly, so I am against putting something off indefinitely that we should have dealt with properly when we did executive compensation.
Trustee Quinn and then Trustee Danko.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I seconded Trustee Danko's motion because I believe that the results of his motion to defer will be the same as the results of the motion to approve this resolution. So I think
that's fine.
Once we hear from the trustees in the first vote, we'll have an understanding what the second vote will be.
I beg that is not what the postpone indefinitely means. It means that it's indefinitely postponed. It means it can be brought back at any time. That's not what it means. It just doesn't have a date on it. It's postponed until which time. It's a good motion to use because, as Trustee Murai pointed out so thoughtfully, was the fact that not all the trustees have read the superintendent's contracts, and you're going to be voting on something you haven't read. So postponing it indefinitely is actually a good motion in this situation. What it means.
Under the chart. Did you have something to add? If we had kept our friend, we wouldn't have this problem.
To you, Madam Chair, there's no real need to read a superintendent contract because the grids were approved in 2011 by a board motion. So they are the same grids that were available. It has nothing to do with reading a superintendent's contract. It just puts them on a grid when they begin.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I have to say, if I could go into more detail about it within camera, I'd be happy to explain. You've killed it. But I'm saying it's difficult to actually value your information or not because we don't have the context. So
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. We know from the Director and from the Treasurer what the number is. We know what the potential is for increased liability through court costs and potentially paying the court costs of the litigant as well, if we lose. So I think we're voting to retroactively pay back that amount which we've already received from the province.
Trustee Ian Tomasi, can't read my own writing.
Trustee Quinn pretty much said what I wanted to say. The money is there. We can't use it for anything else. We're not doing anything subversive. We're simply honoring a contract that's already in existence. We can't go back and change a contract. It doesn't matter how much we talk about it. And we're not going to be changing grids because they were already voted on. So what's in the contract is built into the contract. The money is the money. Black is black, white is white on this one.
Thank you. Trustee Trice.
Thank you. I just want to pick up on what Trustee Danko said, and specifically to the motion indefinitely. I think Trustee Murai has presented us with a little bit of homework. I've taken notes and I plan to do it, and that's what I took indefinitely to mean. So we have we can do our own homework and take a look at this situation.
Thank you. Are we ready for...
I'm sorry. I'm going to be the spokesperson for this group. We have sat here repeatedly and been mistreated by everyone around this table. We have contracts that were signed by this board. You are playing with our lives. and it's unacceptable.
Thank you, Superintendent Pinelli. Trustee Quinn.
Through you, Madam Chair, respectfully, I want to argue that we have not mistreated any of the superintendents. We are following the processes available to us in negotiating contracts, in accepting or requesting pay envelopes from the ministry, and I'm disappointed to feel that some of the highest paid members of our staff feel they're being mistreated by the trustees who are looking out for the best interest of our board.
Thank you. Are we ready for the vote on the kill the main motion, I guess, comes first? Yes, okay, postponing the motion. So we're going to take the vote on that. That would be Trustee Danko's motion. All right, are we ready? Okay, Trustee Quinn.
Opposed.
Anna Maria.
Opposed.
Trustee Rowe.
Opposed.
Trustee Christina.
Opposed.
Trustee Danko.
In favor.
Vice Chair Murray.
In favor.
Trustee Trites.
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi.
Opposed.
Trustee Ingrid.
Opposed.
Trustee Caravella.
In favor.
And what's the, it fails, it's a tie. Okay, so we're going back to I'm opposed to Trustee Danko's motion. Yeah. All right, so we're going back now to Trustee Quinn's. Yes.
So to that, if the trustees who voted to postpone it, they wanted further information, I feel like they haven't received further information, I would request that you vote this motion down, so then it will be tied again, the motion will not pass, and then it will be done.
Anyone else wish to make a comment on that? No? Okay. Trustee Carabella.
Opposed.
All right, so opposed means that we're not giving the senior staff their contract retro pay, okay? And you're opposed to giving them the retro pay, am I correct? I just want to make sure.
Opposed to this motion, yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, Trustee Ingrid.
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi.
In favor.
Trustee Trites.
Opposed.
I'm in favor.
Opposed.
Trustee Danko.
Opposed.
Trustee Christina.
In favor.
Trustee Rowe.
In favor.
Trustee Anna Maria.
In favor.
Trustee Quinn.
In favor.
Thank you. Are we good? Do you want to do it again? Yeah. It fails, all right? Because we only have 8 trustees, all right? So thank you very much, everyone who spoke to that. We're now going to go on to 8.3, Policy 2-48, Violent Threat Risk Assessment. Vice Chair Murray.
Madam Chair, resolved, I'd like to move that it be resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee that Policy 2-48, Violent Threat Risk Assessment, be approved as amended.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Trustee Trites. Any questions to the policy, the Violent Threat Risk Assessment? Ready for the vote? Okay. Trustee Quinn.
In favor.
Trustee Anna Maria.
In favor.
Trustee Rowe.
In favor.
Trustee Christina.
In favor.
Trustee Danko.
In favor.
Vice Chair Murray.
In favor.
Trustee Trites.
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi.
In favor.
Trustee
In favor.
In favor.
4, Policy 5-08, School Anniversary Celebrations. Vice Chair Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move that it be resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board accept the recommendation of the Policy Committee that Policy V-08, School Anniversary Celebrations, be approved as amended.
Thank you. A seconder, please. Trustee Trites. Any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if you'll just bear with me, it's just a comment, but I was at St. Paul's this week, and I know last week we removed the 10-year anniversary, so it brings us down to a couple. They're celebrating 50 years next week. So I thought, yes, we hit the first marker.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor. In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, present the action report to approve the Assumption Catholic Secondary School renewal project. And that's the budget for that project. So just a little background on this. Back in September of this year, or of 2017, this school year, the sports staff presented a long-term facility renewal strategy, of which the Assumption Catholic Secondary School renewal project was a major part of. And then following up on that, staff presented a renewal plan in January of 2018, providing more details on what could be done at Assumption Catholic Secondary School. At a following meeting, after that January meeting, our staff presented a plan for the first phase of that project, and the board approved the first phase, which was for the renovation of the science rooms and addition of air conditioning to the double gym at Assumption. And in the meantime, the staff has continued to work on approvals for future phases of the project, which include a building addition, and we know that any building additions require ministry approval, so staff have been actively working on the follow-up for the rest of that project. So following up on that, staff submitted a business case to the ministry. The ministry informed the board of their support for the addition portion of the project on April 24th, and that was for a 4-classroom addition. That would allow for future growth at Assumption, as well as allowing the board to right-size the school for the new capacity of the school, which would be 1,041 pupil places, so 1,041 pupil places. And the ministry is allowing the board to self-fund the project through our own board's proceeds of disposition. So there's no additional funding from the ministry, but allowing us to spend effectively our own money on increasing the size of the school. And of course, the board can fund any portion of the remainder of the project without ministry involvement, so any renewal projects the board can fund through a board motion on its own. So, I get... Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Can't wait, I want to move this one.
I'll rattle through it quick then. So, our proposed renewal that we have right now, we're still working, fleshing out a lot more of the design details, but looking at a 4-classroom addition, adding a cafeteria and servery space, adding a new learning commons, improving accessibility. It's currently a 3-story design that we're working on. Would be large-scale HVAC upgrades, lighting upgrades, upgrades to specialty rooms, including special education, commercial kitchen, fitness and weight room, adding increased space for teacher workrooms, and then a lot of exterior landscaping and outdoor storage spaces as well. Sorry, I want to keep. I got more to keep going. So when we initially set this out back in January, we estimated that it would be a 3 to 5 year project to complete all of these works, with an estimated price tag of $17.5 million. However, we did indicate that if we could, vacate the facility for a period of time, we could expedite the project and do it at a reduced cost and with reduced impact to students. We do have an alternative site in Burlington, with the public board closing Leslie Pearson High School. So if we could relocate to that facility for a period of time, we could complete all of the renewal works within a year. We would need some portables on site, but the Pearson School has all the necessary specialty rooms. What they lack in is regular classrooms, so we'd have to add a few portables to the site to be able to house all the students from Assumption, but it would just be for regular classrooms. They still have all the science labs, computer labs, the same, if not more, in some cases, than we have at Assumption right now. So the proposed construction schedule for the project would be to relocate to the Pearson site for second semester of the 2018-19 school year. The board staff would explore opportunities to start construction in the fall or even the summer of this year. So anything that we could expedite and get going this summer, we would. But knowing that we'd have students still at Assumption in the fall for semester 1 of the 18-19 school year, so knowing that we still have students there and trying to minimize impact on them. As well, looking at the potential for an extended day in semester 1 to allow more turnaround time. So right now we have 1 day in our calendar for semester turnaround. That would enable us only 1 day to move all of the contents from Assumption over to Pearson, which is just not feasible. So looking at the potential to add an amount of time to each period throughout semester 1 at Assumption, and allow us more time at the end of the semester, where students would be off. It'd allow us more time to be able to move all the content over to Pearson, be able to set up the school to be ready to go for semester 2. And this would allow us to reopen the newly renovated Assumption Secondary School for September of 2019.
With regard to extending your day, is that going to be an issue around busing?
So we've looked at that as well. We're working with HSTS on that. We're not looking at a substantial extension of the day because there are 88 days in the semester. To buy yourself 2 weeks for the turnaround time, looking at about a 7.5-minute extension on per period, so about a 30-minute extension on the day. So we may have to start the day a little bit earlier and end it a few minutes later, but it would be, still starting within the same amount of time around there. So looking at the project funding and the budget, the estimated capital cost for the whole project works, we've estimated it at $14 million, and it's just an estimate at this point, like we usually do with our projects. This would include the new addition, any renewal works that would be listed, professional fees, permits, contingencies, and it would be funded solely from our proceeds of disposition for the board. And of course, it will be tendered as we move through the process, so to get us our best value on our investment, it will be tendered to get actual prices. But we think the $14 million is a good budget number at this point. There would be relocation costs incurred as part of the project. So we're estimating $1.65 million in net relocation costs, and there's a breakdown in your report in Appendix B. This includes rental, moving costs, temporary buildings, setup, IT, transportation. So a large portion of this is transportation. And we would expect to save on utilities by going to Assumption for the second semester. We wouldn't be occupying the Assumption site, so we would save a little bit on utilities there. Most of the relocation costs will be funded by the board's temporary accommodations grant, which is provided by the ministry for things like portables and non-permanent space leases. So the majority of it we could fund through our temporary accommodations grant. The one piece that we can't is the transportation cost. So we're estimating it's on the high side, a conservative estimate right now, $700,000 in transportation costs for that one semester to bus everyone from South Burlington to north of the QEW to Pearson. And that cannot be funded through the temporary accommodations grant, so we must fund it through the board's capital reserve. However, we feel that that's a good investment because we are substantially reducing the cost of the capital cost of the project, which we typically use our capital reserve for as well. So we would pull the $700,000 from our capital reserve, but then save $3.5 million on the kind of the long build plan for Assumption versus the compressed schedule. So we think it's a good investment to a good ROI to do that trade. So I have a few renderings to share. We have some few architect impressions to share. So here's a proposed shot of the front of the building. So we are working through cleaning up the plans to provide more detail. But the front of the school right now is a one-story kind of split design. We're proposing a 3-story addition, mostly to the front, to allow for an enlarged cafeteria, an enlarged or a new learning commons library space, as well as the 4 classrooms on the 3rd floor of the school. And right now we're proposing that would connect back to the tower portion, to the 3rd floor portion of the school, to allow a more substantive 3rd floor there, and allowing us to get an elevator and washrooms up to the 3rd floor as well. A couple of the renderings, looking south at the front of the school, computer rendering. And then looking from the other side, kind of off the hydro corridor, kind of the new facade down the west side of the building. So at this point, staff's proposing that we proceed with the accelerated schedule to relocate Assumption School Community over to Pearson for second semester of next year, and then requesting authorization to approve the budget, the capital budget of $14 million to be expensed from POD, and approve to expense the transportation portion of the relocation costs from the capital reserve. And if trustees were to approve this tonight and proceed, we would then proceed with having public meetings with the school community, as well as the incoming grade 8 parents, to give them further details of the project, as well as how things would work for next year. So we have two resolutions on the table for you tonight. I could take any questions at this point.
Thank you.
So
Trustee Intimacy, you have a question?
I actually have a comment, but if we want to get a seconder on this first. I want to thank Ryan and his staff for a excellent job. Thank you, everyone. I know the community's waited long. I know, staff and students and families are excited. I know there's going to be some logistical issues, and I know that a team, as I understand from Mr. Overholt, that everything's going to get looked after so nicely. I know it's a little bit rough on the graduates because that's their last semester, but I believe Principal Deanne has some plans to make that last portion special for them. So again, I can't begin to tell you how thankful I am.
I'll just say that there was a larger team working on this project. So Giacomo and Tim started this, almost a year and a half ago, and I kind of jumped in halfway. So it's definitely not, my own project by any means. So Fred's had a lot of input on it. Andrea and her team, Tim's been, leading it throughout the way. So I'm just the messenger tonight.
Just want to say thank you to everybody. I know it started a long time ago. I know it's been discussed ad nauseum for the last 10 years, and it's just nice to see something bricks and mortar happening for this community.
School Board approves the preliminary estimated project budget not to exceed $14 million and approve the use of proceeds of disposition POD in the amount of $14 million for the Assumption Catholic Secondary School renewal and addition project in the city of Burlington. And the second one is resolved that the Halton Catholic District School Board approve the use of capital reserve funds in the amount of $700,000 to fund student transportation costs as a result of the Assumption Catholic Secondary School renewal and addition project in the city of Burlington. We have a mover and a seconder, so we'll take the vote. Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Thank you. Trustee Ingrid?
I'm so in favor.
Trustee Intomasi, we have you?
Woohoo! In favor.
Okay, Trustee Trice?
In favor.
Vice Chair Morai?
In favor.
Trustee Danko?
In favor.
Trustee Christina?
In favor.
Trustee Rowe?
In favor.
Trustee Anaria?
In favor.
Trustee Quinn?
In favor.
Thank you. Eight point six, naming of newly consolidated Oakville South Catholic Elementary School. Superintendent Pinelli.
Yes, good evening. It's to inform this evening trustees of the response from Bishop Crosby on the selection of the name for the newly consolidated Oakville South Catholic Elementary School. Following our regular board meeting of April 17th, the director forwarded a letter to Bishop Crosby, including the prioritized list of names. You'll see that as attached. Bishop Crosby has responded with his approval of the name of the school to be St. Nicholas Catholic Elementary School, and you'll find attached his response. So this evening, there is a resolution before you.
Trustee Quinn? Thank you. A seconder, please. Trustee Trice, thank you. Any comments, questions to this? No? All right, we'll take the vote. Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Ingrid?
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi?
In favor.
Trustee Trice?
In favor.
Vice Chair Morai?
In favor.
Trustee Danko?
In favor.
Trustee Christina?
In favor.
Trustee Rowe?
In favor.
Trustee Anna Maria?
In favor.
Trustee Quinn?
In favor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item is the Trustee Code of Conduct 8.7. This continues on from the resolution that was made in camera and brought into the public domain through Vice Chair Trice. Vice Chair Morai. Sorry. So I will read the Trustee Code of Conduct 8.7. Be it resolved that the Board of Trustees confirm the resolution that Trustee Michael be sanctioned for breaching the Trustee Code of Conduct and that Trustee Michael has agreed to the sanctions imposed. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Intomasi, seconded by Trustee Rowe. Any questions to this matter? Trustee Quinn, speak carefully.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like just to clarify this motion by amending it slightly. Looking at it, resolve the Halton Catholic District School Board of Trustees sanction Trustee Michael for a breach of the Trustee Code of Conduct and that she be removed from the discipline committee for the remainder of the elected term. So I want to put the word elected in there, so there's no misunderstanding that it's not of the school term, but it's of the elected term of the trustee. And as well as from the 2018 director search, from the beginning of the end of the hiring process, and that trustee Michael be barred from attending, and this is my other clarification, the next 2 public board meetings, and that trustee Michael may attend regular in-camera meetings. So as this is being brought to the public for the first time, I believe that the sanction takes place in the next 2 board meetings, and that's why I think we have to clarify that in the language with these 2 amendments.
Let's just go back a minute. First of all, this was a resolution that came out of the May 8th trustee board meeting.
It's not in force until we vote. It's not in force until we vote on this.
I'm talking. Okay. So basically, we had the vote. It was an in-camera vote. It was then brought into the public domain through Vice Chair Marai. What this is this is a confirmation. According to policy 1-36, the board shall do the following things by resolution at a meeting of the board, and the vote on the resolution shall be open to the public. It is to confirm a determination which has already happened regarding a trustee's breach of this code of conduct. So it's confirm or revoke a determination. So this is not the initial resolution. The initial resolution came to this public forum through Vice Chair Marai. This is a confirmation. That's all it is.
Madam Chair, I respectfully disagree with your reading of our own code of conduct. When we deal with policies every day, and none of them generally deal with us. This is the most serious policy that we deal with. It's our own trustee code of conduct, and I think dealing with it in camera as necessary according to our own bylaws is important, but discussing it here in public is part of our process. We have the ability to edit and amend in the public session as we see fit. Now, if I don't have a seconder, I understand that, but I believe we have the right to amend this resolution.
I'm not, basically I'm reading word for word exactly what is in the trustee code of conduct. That's the first thing I'm saying. And I have given each trustee the code of conduct a number of times recently, but if anyone has left theirs at home, I'll be more than happy to pass out an extra one. And quite clearly, I read those words, confirm or revoke a determination. Trustee Michael was informed of this situation, I believe it was last Wednesday, and immediately said that she would not be... I'm not finished. Yes, but at least give me the courtesy of finishing my words before you put your hand up. All right? And she said that she would not be appealing that sanction, so it started on Wednesday. I know exactly what's happening here, Trustee Quinn. You want her to be away on the night of June 19th by doing that. Is that correct? Yes, go ahead.
To you, Madam Chair, respectfully, hopefully, that you take this respectfully. I didn't understand that Trustee Michael was being sanctioned from this meeting. It wasn't until the vote was held that I noticed she was missing, because she was here for the in-camera session. So nothing to do with that. Right. And she had not been sanctioned publicly, and the vote hadn't been taken as to whether she had been sanctioned. And I will read this to you, because I think you left out a word when you read our code of conduct. And, excuse me, the board may confirm, vary, or revoke a sanction. So vary is an opportunity we have in this. And my attempt to vary the sanction is to add the 3 words, that the remainder of the elected term be noted so that there's no confusion, and that Trustee Michael be barred from attending the next 2 board meetings, because only after she is sanctioned in the public session can she truly be known to be away from these meetings.
I have not left out a word. There are 2 separate phrases. The first phrase, the one that I gave you, was confirm or revoke a determination regarding a trustee's breach of this code of conduct. Following that statement, there is another one. Confirm, vary, or revoke a sanction after confirming or revoking a determination. If any trustee would like to get a copy of it, I've got plenty of copies, and you can certainly read it for yourselves. Yes, absolutely.
To you, Madam Chair, maybe I could point trustees to the previous page before you get to that section where written notice is given to the trustees, and the trustee has 14 days to receive and respond, and that happened. So after the meeting, the letter was sent to Trustee Michael by the chair, and I'm not sure if all the trustees were copied on that. Can't remember. And anyway, Trustee Michael waived the 14 days and accepted the sanction. So to go back and say that that's different, we can't do that.
Vice Chair Murray, did you have something you wanted to say? Did I miss you? No? Okay. All right, Trustee Quinn.
Through you, Madam Chair. There is no sanction in place until this vote is held, in my reading of the public nature of this. So we can't sanction a trustee until it comes to the public session. Therefore, following this vote, the sanction can be implemented. Trustee Michael has the right to be at this meeting right now, but I think not until we vote in the public session that we actually approve the sanction in the public session does it take place.
What we're doing at this moment is we are confirming or revoking. The motion adopted in camera was the one that Vice Chair Murray gave us at the beginning of the meeting. Do you want me to read it again? I can read it again if anyone would like me to do that. Trustee Carabella?
Which page are you? Where are you?
On the Code of Conduct, I am on page 10, but on terms of the in-camera resolution that was brought out of in-camera, I have it here separate, but it is on the minutes of the May 8th in-camera board meeting at the bottom of page 2, carried over to page 3. Trustee Rowe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Trustee Quinn has made his point, so I would request that you either rule on it or call for a seconder.
I think it's out of order. I truly do. And if anyone would like a copy of I realize I keep asking if you have them. If you want a copy of this, I have enough, certainly enough to share, and you can read it for yourself. You don't have to take my word for it. It's all here in black and white. Now, after we have confirmed it, after we have confirmed or revoked a determination, then you can confirm, vary, or revoke it after you have done the initial confirmation. Okay, but you have to confirm it first. Confirm or revoke a determination regarding a trustee breach of this code of conduct. And then it says you could confirm, vary, or revoke a sanction after confirming or revoking a determination regarding a trustee's breach of this code of conduct. It's here in black and white, and I'm happy to give you copies. Arlene.
Madam Chair, I'd like to call the vote on the confirmation.
Thank you. All right, so the motion, where is it? I just had it. It's okay. The motion, be it resolved that the Board of Trustees confirm the resolution that Trustee Michael be sanctioned for breaching the trustee code of conduct and that Trustee Michael has agreed to the sanctions imposed. Okay, we're calling the vote. We've got a mover and a seconder? No? Yes? Yes, okay. Arlene, that's right, Arlene Mark. Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
Trustee Ingrid.
Abstain.
Trustee Ian Tomasi.
In favor.
Trustee Trites.
In favor.
Vice Chair Murray.
In favor.
Trustee Danko.
Favor.
Trustee Christina.
I'll be abstaining.
Thank you. Trustee Rowe.
In favor.
Trustee Anna Maria.
Abstain.
Thank you. Trustee Quinn.
In favor.
Thank you. Is that finished? Okay. One, 218 to 219 budget estimates draft 1. That scares me when you say draft 1.
Just an opportunity, Madam Chair, to bring in more information as we move along in the development and approval of our budget estimates for next year. And we are pleased to present trustees today with the very first draft of the budget estimates, with all the pieces that have been received and communicated along the way to trustees. We've had the opportunity to put it all together, and it does reflect a surplus position of $2 million. As it's outlined in Table 1 of the report. The budget incorporates all the program enhancements that were presented at the March 7 trustee budget session, as well as increases in the transportation costs, temporary accommodations, and contractual costs resulting from changes to the employment standards, which are outlined in Table 3. Staffing additions due to growth, as well as additional announced funding, are also included in this budget draft and listed in Table 2. Not included in the draft are the new initiatives listed in Table 4, and we will ask trustees to vote on each and every single one of these separately at the next board meeting so that it would inform what we will be including in the final draft of the budget. We also would like to ask trustees that if there's any other suggestions that may impact the budget, that they be brought forward at the next board meeting on June 5th so that we know what changes we should be putting through the final budget estimates for the June 19 meeting. We prepared a short presentation today to walk you through the report. We do recognize it's a long report. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of appendices that pretty much dissect the budget in different ways and present you the information. So I'll pass it on to Aaron and Jay to walk you through the budget. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Roxana. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to go over the presentation. Now, you'll be happy to know that we've kind of condensed this report so it's not as long, this presentation is not as long as maybe some past ones have been. Also, in conjunction with this presentation, we'd like you to also we're going to refer back to the actual board report and reference all the appendices as we go through it. So looking at the agenda, we're going to look at the provincial overview, enrollment, revenues and expenses, staff enhancements, program enhancements, board financial position, new initiatives, and finally our next steps. Now, looking at our provincial position, this information, this is the projections that we received from the ministry, wasn't forwarded until the end of April. After examining it, we noticed there were some discrepancies which we needed to get clarification from the ministry. So we now have that clarification, and as a result, we are still the lowest funded board in the province. As you can see there, I'll just identify what this represents are 12 of the nearest boards. So basically all the GTA boards and Hamilton. We then excluded certain grants that may be unique to some boards and unique to some boards, but not every board would have it. Such grants being the geographic circumstances grant, interest expense, non-permanently financed, things like that are, each board would have a different value there. So after excluding all that, you can see that the highest board in the GTA is actually Toronto District School Board. The orange bar there, though, the second one, is actually the provincial average. So that's the province. And if you travel down to the bottom there in green is our board. And the board immediately above us is the Halton District School Board, our coterminous board. Now, Jay's actually going to look at the enrollment, and I'll pass it over to Jay.
Thank you, Aaron. Good evening, everybody. So I'll talk about enrollment and then transition into revenues and expenses for tonight. So beginning with the first slide. So this is a graph of our enrollment over a 10-year period, including the 2018-19 fiscal period we're trying to budget for. Appendix C in your package, which is page 88, will provide you with more details, the numbers by panel. I'll just mention that the elementary panel is expected to increase by 0.5% over the 2017-18 revised estimates, and the secondary panel is expected to increase by 6.7%. Overall, this is an increase of 2.5% over the revised estimates. And the last thing to mention is that our enrollment is the main driver for our revenues, which will be the next slide. So on the screen here is a table comparing the 2018-19 budget estimates with the 2017-18 revised estimates and the 2016-17 actuals. More details provided on Appendix A1, which is page 76 of your package. Before I move on to the next couple of slides, which will highlight the changes year over year, at the bottom of the table is the percentage change overall, which is 4.52% over the 2017-18 revised. So on to the highlights. The first major change is our grants for student needs, which is our largest revenue source. This is broken down on Appendix E, page 90 of your package. And this is made up of the legislative grants and municipal taxes. This is expected to increase by 4.9%. The main reasons are listed on the slide here. The top three reasons are the key reasons, which are increase to enrollment of 865 average daily enrollment, or ADE for short. Again, that's 2.5% increase over the 2017-18 year. The second driver is a 1.5% increase to the salary benchmark for staffing. That's built into the GSN formula. And lastly, there's two new components within two grant allocations. The first one being Pupil Foundation, which now includes grade 7 and 8 allocation for the transition of students to high school, and the second one being within the special education envelope, which is for multidisciplinary teams. So the next slide will touch on two other major changes. The first being Government of Canada revenue, which is expected to increase by almost 40%. The main reasons for this are the expansion to the language instruction for newcomers to Canada program, as well as the immigrant settlement and adaptation program. So lastly, the declines are to tuition fees. That's expected to go down by 11%, mainly due to the decrease in international student enrollment. The main reason for this is there's less class-based intersecondary schools due to increasing enrollment in the secondary panel. And the second decrease is to the education development charges revenues of 46%. This is mainly due to the real estate market slowdown, which has resulted in less development by property developers. And moving on to expenses. So this table is similar to the revenues one. It's comparing the 2018-19 budget estimates to the 17-18 revised and the 16-17 actuals. The appendices that support the table here are Appendix A2 to A8 and Appendix B to B-2. These are found on pages 77 to 83 and 85 to 87 in your package. Again, at the bottom of the table, the percentage change year over year is 4.52, just like with revenues. So moving on to the next slide. So to highlight on the major expense changes, there are four here. The first being our base expense, which is salary and wages and employee benefits. They're expected to increase by 4.5 and 4.3% respectively. The main driver for staffing, of course, is enrollment growth, identifying more student needs, the additional revenue for grade 7, 8 pathways teachers and multidisciplinary team, as well as grid movements. For benefits, the main increase is the statutory and insured benefits that go along with the staffing increase, as well as WSIB benefits due to legislative changes. So for supplies and service increase, Appendix B1 on page 86, will outline in more detail the supplies and service breakdown. The main increases are to maintenance, utilities, and instruction budgets, and this overall increase is about 4.3%. The next item is our rental and lease budgets. Those are expected to go up by 62%. This is mainly due to temporary accommodation needs. We need more portables, so the costs in leases and moving them are increased. Lastly, the fees and contractuals are expected to go up by 9.6%. The details are on Appendix B2, which is page 87 of your package. This is expected to go up due to transportation costs and contractual services, again, due to growth and changes to the Employment Standards Act. So I'll be able to take any questions before we move on to staffing enhancements.
I may go back one or two slides, but since we're doing questions. Okay, so two ones. On that slide right there, though, you were saying rental and lease increases. When was the last time we went to RFP on temporary accommodations? Or like if that's maybe just something we could take away to the feedback for later.
Temporary accommodation refers to leasing portables.
Right.
And that is different from year to year with respect to how many we need based on the rapid growth in the north.
Right.
And it's been growing year over year with Milton expanding. And the other big portion of that increase is the move, is the relocation for Assumption. So that's the big chunk. So it's not as much of a percentage increase year over year just on portables, but this year will include that.
No, but I meant, when was the last time we went to RFP on that item? And I'm happy to get it later if it's not.
I don't have the actual year. I will have to get back to you with the year on that.
Okay. And then, if I may, Madam Chair, on a few slides back on revenue allocation continued, you mentioned tuition fees and education development charges revenue decreased 11% and 46.2% respectively. Why? International student enrollment has declined over the previous year. So I know we've seen pretty substantial growth, and obviously maybe the overall growth of it has been slowing just because there's only so many seats in our high schools, but the total number of students is growing.
Maybe I'll start, and I know Superintendent Pinelli has details in terms of our strategy for international student program. There are slightly fewer international students enrolled for next year. One would be spacing, and the other one is our strategy to ensure success for these students. So if they aren't going to be successful for graduation, we're looking very strongly at what supports we provide. We're also focusing on different markets as well for more short-term students. So there's going to be some revenues coming from other sources. At this point in time, we haven't forecasted those because it's something new for next year. But it will have a revenue source and some expected costs, but mostly will be a net revenue. And then the agent fees charges from year to year will differ. So depending on what that is, the net revenue will we netted against the revenue will fluctuate. And I'm sure Superintendent Pinelli might have a bit more details on that.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. As you're aware, our strategy has always been that we only have certain schools that have availability for international students. As you heard earlier this evening, there are certain schools that we have on the board that we are over capacity and we have portables. So that has never been our strategy. Our strategy is to ensure that schools that have pupil placements, that's where we channel our international students. So that's the first piece. So it's not that we take everybody. We also have academic standards. We do get a lot of applications, but each of those individual students is reviewed by myself to ensure that we get students that are going to be successful. There's no point in just having international students arrive in our schools if they're not going to be successful. So those are a lot of factors that come into play. And the markets are changing with international students. We have been, as I've repeatedly brought to the board, we are trying to diversify because we are learning as we go through this process some of the challenges that we are facing with our international students in terms of being able to come in and fit into the cultures that we have in our schools. So that's part of the strategy.
Thank you, Vice Chair Murray.
I think one of the purposes of this process is to provide feedback, and I can't speak for everyone at the table, but I can, one thing I've commended staff on is how much we've grown this program and how it has significantly benefited our bottom line to to, one, provide a very good quality education for those that come to our board, but also help sustain programs and grow programs that benefit our own students. And what I would like to see, just frankly, is understanding there are limitations within the seats we have at secondary schools. I would like to see this program, the enrollment grow of Catholic students from international destinations to this, a plan to grow it in this budget, and a plan outside of this budget that's more granular. Because we've clearly been devoting more resources to this, as we should, but we should see the benefits in the bottom line. Thank you.
When we forecast, so definitely the point is very well taken. Growing and expanding the international student program is our focus in a sustainable manner. The other piece of this in forecasting the budget, we look at what the information we do have and the information that we're comfortable in projecting enrollment. And currently, based on the information we have, the applications we have, approved or not approved, in the system, this is the number that we're comfortable going. At revised, we may have a different number. And usually, we are more conservative in the beginning because there's so many unknowns. And then at revised, we come back with more data. Now, students are in their seats. There's more applications for the summer. We don't like to forecast those just based on an estimate that we don't have the data on. So we need to have the student information in the system in order to make it here. So this is a very real number. It's not an estimate for next year. This is what we currently have. We continue working on growing it, and in revise you may see a different number. So that just in terms of how we forecast enrollment, we do the same with the overall enrollment of the board. We don't just say, here's our target, it's what do we have in the system, and then we do some projections on appropriations that we expect, on grades that are moving along or coming in, but the bulk of our students are what we know, and we are very, very close with our overall enrollment. We're within 99-point-something% typically of what we project. And fluctuations in the budget, we want to minimize those, and that's one of the reasons, but absolutely focusing on expanding the international students has been our focus. And there's two main areas in this budget that allow the lowest funded board in the province to have a surplus. International students program and expanding that, and facility revenues, because we internalize the costs in maintaining our facilities and making them very marketable for rentals and used by other parties. And that typically has been used for the 2 million and change that we usually get in those revenues. We would like to see that in the capital reserve. This year, in this budget, we are not able to do that because we're the lowest funded board, because there's been increases due to legislation in terms of benefits, in terms of the Employment Standards Act, things that we had to look into in terms of costs that we can't avoid. We know we're going to incur and have to pay, and they're far over what has been funded. Ministry hasn't funded more than their 2% allocation on the non-salary benchmarking in terms of growth and increasing costs, but our real costs are higher. That's reflected in this. So yes, we have a 2 million surplus, but 2 million of that should every year is a facility revenue that should go into the capital reserve, then be used on renewing our schools. This year, it's 1.25 million, of which we have not yet included, and I think I'm taking the winds out of Aaron's sails. But the 700,000 on transportation on assumption is not yet in this draft and will come down from that number. So the 2 million will become 1.3, and the 1.25 million into the capital reserve will become 550. So it's a small amount going in. We do recognize the long term of using money on assumption is that the proceeds of this position, we're not using as much because of having a condensed project for assumption. So the savings from there could be used just the same as the capital reserve, so it's a good investment. But those are the main two reasons that keep us not in a deficit position. And we've made, and the staffing enhancements that we'll go through next, you'll see we have made a lot of additions to staffing for growth, for additional positions that have been identified with offsetting revenue, but also a big investment in special education, and we're very proud to be able to do all of this with the funding that we do have available. And I do believe you had a question on EDC. Is that still? Okay, thank you. But great question.
Okay. All right, thank you. Staffing enhancements. So these staffing enhancements are typically due to growth or new ministry initiatives. So let's look at our enhancements for the upcoming year. Well, on the elementary panel, we have elementary teachers due to growth of about 10 additional elementary teachers. We also have the elementary pathway itinerant teachers, which is part of this year's GSNs. We have 8 teachers there. The secondary panel, we actually have 44.3 teachers that are required due to growth. And this was reflected in our ADE, especially in the secondary panel, which had a larger growth relative to the elementary panel. I should mention that everything on this slide here has an offsetting revenue. So even though there's an expense coming in, we are generating revenue to cover that expense. So it's net zero from that standpoint. Looking down in the second panel, we can see the professional and paraprofessional staff. A large part of this is also due to ministry initiative in the multidisciplinary teams. You can see there's some child and youth counselors, a psychologist, and we have a social worker as well. And this is all part of that new ministry initiative for the upcoming year on the multidisciplinary teams. The second page, we have staff, again, with the EAs, classrooms. We have through growth, we have 13 additional EAs. We also show a -1 in the ECE. That's what we forecast based on our current enrollment levels, but this may change as well once we get additional information in. We also have an additional secondary vice principal, and that's at Jean Vanier, which we're adding additional vice principal there. And then finally, the only item on this, now I mentioned on the previous slide that everything was covered under a offsetting revenue. The only item that isn't on this slide is the IT supervisor for network security. And the reason this came up was part of the regional internal audit team's audit on our IT security, and it was a need of the board and a current gap that we currently have, and it is a required position that we need for our board in order to maintain our current standards. So program enhancements. So this is typically due to increasing costs. Now this first slide here, we actually already reviewed this first slide back in March. So nothing's changed from March on this slide here. But I'd like to draw attention to the second slide, and this has changed since our last March discussion. And what we're going to see here is we have an increase in transportation. We now find out what our transportation budget is, and it's an additional cost of $811,000. We also have an increase in fees and contractual requirements for relating to the Employment Standards Act, the Bill 148, and we have $300,000 that we've allocated to that. And finally, we have the temporary accommodations to increase, to address growth, as well as the Assumption Project, and that is $1.5 million or so, of which we do have the offsetting revenue to cover that with the increase in our temporary accommodation grant that Jay spoke of earlier. So, what's our financial position? Well, currently, our financial position is going to include everything that we currently require to maintain our current service levels. So looking at this position, there's a lot of numbers here and such, but I'd just like to draw attention. Roxana mentioned $2 million or so that we have in a surplus, and you can see that value there in the 1.983. Now we have an operating surplus of $581,000. That's the in-year change at the very top. I'm going to look, everyone, at the in-year change line. So that's what our surplus is for the current year. So we have an operating surplus of $581,000. Now, you remember we've talked about in the past that we want to maintain a 1% reserve. The ministry requested a 1% reserve to have on board for any kind of operating issues. Well, that has now been raised to the 2% as of last year. So working towards 2% would be about $7.3 million or so. We've already passed the 1% requirement they initially had. Now we're working towards the 2% requirement. So we're looking at adding $500,000 towards that goal. You can see the capital reserve there. That's what Roxana mentioned before about adding to our capital reserve through some of our revenue that we receive through the facilities and the rental of our facilities and turf rentals and things like that. Now that says $1.25 million there. As we all know, we've passed the Assumption Project. So from that 1.25, we're going to be reducing that level by $700,000 to cover the transportation for Assumption next year. Those items in red there, those are items that we're going to have every single year, and essentially those are offsetting any kind of expense we have for our amortization of our capital. So each year we have to expense a portion of our capital. We want to have revenue coming in to match that expense, and that's what that purpose of that red funding there is for. I also should mention, Roxana mentioned this as well, that in order to do this, a large part of it is coming from our revenue from international students and from all of our facilities. So we have before and after care rental, community use, turf rentals, and things like that, and that's what's allowing us to balance the books and have a surplus as well. So, this is our little disclaimer, for lack of a better term. Our EPOs, all EPOs aren't out as of yet, so we don't have all the information available for it. Do we expect more? Yes, we do. Do we have them now? No, we don't. If we have them by our next draft, we'll include them, but chances are we might not have all our available education program other or non-GSNs. As we all know, everyone's approved, our trustees have approved the Assumption Catholic Secondary School project, so we require the $700,000 for transportation, so that'll reduce our transfer to capital reserve. Enrollments are estimates right now, and they are always constantly changing, so that could actually have an increase or decrease to our draft financial position based on any changes to those enrollment figures. And finally, there could be additional information released from the ministry between now and draft 2, and then if that's the case, we'll make sure we update the budget for draft 2. Now, new initiatives. New initiatives are to help a growing board improve upon the service that we offer and add to the service that we offer to our community. So what are our new initiatives for this year that has been identified by senior staff? So the first one is our non-union job evaluation, and one FTE for the job evaluation officer. This is a one-year contract, and it's through Human Resources. And the approximate cost, a one-time cost, would be $200,000, and that includes the evaluation as well as the person to work on that evaluation, the job evaluation officer. We also have additional commissionaires for schools in need, and this is coming from school services. How much is that? Well, that's an extra $42,000, and that's an ongoing cost, meaning it's year after year. The electronic file project, so this includes annual licenses, scanners, temporary staff to get it rolling. This is coming through the director's office, but really it impacts the entire board. So the cost for that is $110,000, of which approximately half of it is ongoing, so that half will include the licenses on an ongoing basis. Implementation of a new library system through curriculum services. Cost of that is an $85,000 one-time expense. And finally, we have the budget for new music equipment, again through curriculum services, and it's an ongoing cost of $45,000. So tallying all that up comes to a total of $482,000. Now, what we would like to do is bring this back, the same list back to board at our next board meeting in June, and have everyone vote on all these items individually. So we will present it to the trustees to make the decision and to let us know how you wish us to proceed when we bring forth our final budget for approval on June 19th. So next steps. Well, on May 28th, we actually have a SEAC presentation. June 5th, we have the 2018-19 budget estimates draft 2, which will present the new initiatives again. And finally, June 19th, we present our final budget, balanced budget, to trustees for approval. So that concludes our presentation. If there's any questions, the team will be here to answer.
Thank you very much. Very informative as always. Any questions? No questions? Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we are going on to information items. 10.1, student trustee update, and that is Trustee Anna Maria.
Thank you. First, we wanted to say we're very glad to be joined here tonight by our incoming student trustees for the 2018-2019 year, and we welcome them. Furthermore, all 6 of us will be attending the OSAECO AGM in Toronto next weekend. Personally, as the co-chair of the Ontario Student Voice Awards for this year, I will be awarding our 6 finalists with scholarships for their dedication to student voice and involvement, and these winners are from across the province. Ingrid, Christina, and I are also working on our leadership conference coming up in early June. So we will be having a guest speaker, breakout sessions led by senators, and information sessions for the incoming senators as to what to expect and the role. On the topic of senators, the applications for these senators are also out right now, and next year's trustees will be electing these senators over the coming weeks. That's all for tonight.
Very much. Christina? Ingrid?
I just want to quickly add on. So May 8th, we had our Catholic Education Week initiative, which I've been working to plan for a year as the Vice President of the Catholic Board Council. So it was at the WE Global Learning Center, and it was a huge success. We had Spencer West come out. We partnered with OCSTA, Luke Stocking from Development and Peace. There was like over 250 students from across the province. So it was really great to see them all come out, and they really enjoyed the day. So, yeah.
Ingrid?
I think my two lovely co-trustees handled everything, so they're both amazing, and I'm really thankful for them.
Thank you. Yes, we are amazed, and we are thankful for all three of you. Thank you. All right, 10.2, School Educational Field Trip, Superintendent McGillicuddy.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair, presented for information is a very abbreviated list of approved school educational trips, and I'll take any questions.
Any questions from trustees? No? Thank you very much. 10.3, appointment of student trustees for the 2018-2019 school year. Superintendent McGillicuddy.
Through you, Madam Chair, presented for information is the appointment of student trustees for 2018-19. Election of student trustees took place at St. Ignatius of Loyola on Tuesday, April 24th. After each candidate had an opportunity to speak and answer questions, student senators from our 9 secondary schools elected their new slate of student trustees, who were introduced by our director earlier in the evening. William Charlebaugh, representing Oakville, a grade 11 student at Holy Trinity. Stephanie Mazza, a grade 11 student at Assumption, representing Burlington. And Denzel Herrero, a grade 10 student at Jean Vanier, representing North Halton. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, and we do welcome new student trustees, and I'm sure you'll learn much from our current student trustees. They're amazing too. 10.4, Construction Report, St. Scholastica Catholic Elementary School, Superintendent Merrick.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, we present the construction update for the St. Scholastica Catholic Elementary School. So in a few pictures there that you have, roof trusses are going in for the gym now. Precast roof deck is all installed, and we're starting site grading at the back of the school right now. Still on track for a September 2018 opening. And upcoming work will be window installation, which is about half done now, and then slab floors on the second floor, and as well as the mechanical equipment will be coming in. Some of it came last week, the rest comes tomorrow, so that'll be a big expense out of the way on the project. So if you happen to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any questions for Milton number 8? Thank you very much. Thank you. 10.5, Talent Edge 2018 Annual Conference, Superintendent O'Hara.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I have with me this evening Katie Ongaro, who's our Human Resources Analyst, who's patiently been here waiting for this report. And again, both of us did attend the Talent Edge Conference in Kansas City, Missouri, April the 16th and 17th, and we were one of the few flights that actually got out on the 15th during the ice storm. So we did manage to get there and attend the conference. So we attended this conference with school boards from across North America and participated in various breakout sessions, listened to keynote speakers, as well as looking at developments on a number of the office suite applications that we purchased through People Admin. And so the two main software pieces that we have are SmartFind Express and Perform. SmartFind Express is an automated absence reporting system which we use to track all of our absences for all employee groups, as well as to use to find and fill short-term vacancies for many of our employee groups. And Perform is a new automated performance management system which we are implementing and putting in place for our support staff groups. Again, a move away from paper into more electronic formats. While we were there, on the first day of the conference, it was announced that People Admin had been taken over by a much larger fish, Power School. Power School owns a lot of different products, some of which we also use, one of which is Trillium. And so we were able to go and listen to the new owners talk about their vision for the company, as well as how all of the products that are used in education will be integrated in the future and how they'll all be able to talk to each other without silos. So that's not just on the management side, but that's also on the academic side in terms of the software. We also were able to listen to a couple new solutions that they're pushing out, one of which is analytics, and as you know, analytics is the future. They have a new module which can dive deep into SmartFine Express data and produce information that a lot of our trustees associations and the ministry are looking at for upcoming rounds of bargaining. And in fact, the Ministry of Education is looking at possibly funding the purchase of some tools that would be similar to this, if not this. We also found out a lot more about another tool which they have is called Records. And Records essentially is another way of creating electronic files and information, and again, moving us away from paper into more efficient processes within HR. So some really exciting things that came out of this conference and things that we continue to be looking at in order to make HR more efficient as we grow. So certainly happy to answer any questions, Katie and I. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Trustee Quinn?
Thank you, through Madam Chair. I just had one question about a fill rate. Is that attendance? Is that the term for employee attendance?
To the chair, fill rate is essentially how many positions are filled, how many of our absences are being filled on any given day by occasional teachers or supply staff. Thank you.
Trustee Intomasi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Superintendent O'Hara. I'm just curious, because I'm very ignorant of software. Would we have any huge differences between us and the U.S. in how they, I don't know what kind of unions they have, I don't know, I mean, I'm thinking there's got to be some differentiation in there somewhere. Just be curious.
Thank you for that question, and certainly the U.S. is such a huge place that there's significant differences between states. There are some states that certainly would operate a little bit more similarly to us in terms of the bureaucracy and the oversight, and others that are much more like the Wild West. So there are school boards that have quite a bit of autonomy, and others that would have a fairly strong union base and a fair amount of bureaucracy in terms of what they can and cannot do. So all of these products are designed so that they can be customized to meet the requirements of any individual board, of which Ontario tends to run similarly. Thank you.
At 10.6, American Educational Research Association 2018 Annual Meeting. Dr. Collymore.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. This information report details the annual meeting of the AERA, which is the American Educational Research Association. This association supports the dissemination of practical application of educational research results, and it encourages scholarly inquiry related to education and encourages the use of research to improve education and educational policy. Each year, AERA has an annual meeting, and it attracts over 15,000 attendees, and this year the annual meeting was held in New York City, and I got the pleasure of attending on behalf of the board. The program of the conference is pretty well-rounded. It has a number of speakers or division meetings, paper symposiums where people are presenting actual research papers that have been published, roundtable presentations and discussions where you get to have more informal conversations about actual research projects that people are doing on various topics. And as the Chief Officer of Research, I'm privy to our strategic plan, our board improvement plan, the various ministry and board initiatives that we do, so I was able to self-select sessions that pertain to our board priorities, things like parental engagement, mathematics achievement, school improvement, and of course I also attended the more general sessions on just educational research in general, methodology, assessment, evaluation. So because of the self-selected information sessions, I was able to really ask questions at the sessions, gather contacts, and exchange information with them. But I also left with a lot of resources to help further build my capacity
in areas that I'm less familiar with, but I know that are important to our board priorities. I was very excited to come back and share my learnings with my team and the knowledge, and really the hope is to enhance the types of educational research activities that we do at our board. So I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity for allowing me to attend the conference, and I look forward to attending future meetings and even presenting our research at these meetings. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you. 10.7, long-term capital plan update. Superintendent Nagoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is just an opportunity for trustees to look back at the draft long-term capital plan that was presented to you. There was a hard copy that you received. It was quite a lengthy document and a presentation made by Fred and Dylan, walking you through how to read it and link the various sections. So we want to take this opportunity to bring this back on the agenda and allow trustees to ask more questions. Just to inform you that on May 7, the board held a public meeting, and a total of 19 individuals have attended that meeting, including city and towns and the region of Halton, child care providers, and other members of the community. For this meeting, there has been allotted a delegation time for public to speak, but we did not receive any delegations. And we also have a survey out there to reach out to the community that will be closing on May 25th. And at the next board meeting, we'll be presenting the survey results, as well as bring this back for an action item for trustees to approve in principle the long-term capital plan. I'll pass it on to Fred and Dylan for anything further to add.
Thank you. Gentlemen?
Through you, Madam Chair, I have nothing further to add. This is really just an open session. If trustees had any questions with regards to the plan or any points of clarifications, additions, addendums, suggestions, recommendations, we're here to listen, and then we'd hope to take your feedback and integrate that within the upcoming final version of the plan coming forward on June 5th.
Thank you. Any questions for the team? Trustee Quinn?
Thank you. Through Madam Chair. In reading the numbers and the projected enrollment in the north, and looking at the number of students who come to our high schools from outside of our board, I'm wondering what our philosophy is for the growth of the Catholic school system, when what we're building for is for an open access school. So if we are building the Catholic school system to serve the community, and the Catholic students coming from our feeder schools will be the minority of those students, are we building for competition with public boards, or are we building Catholic high schools because we have the opportunity to solicit funds from the province to do so? I want maybe a question for the director. What's the philosophy behind growing in areas where Catholic schools are not majority filled by Catholic students?
Director Dawson?
Can just answer it. More in Milton, we have around a 40% open access rate. So about between 30 and 40% of our students are not Catholic in secondary. That's not the same in our elementary schools, because we're mandated to have open access, and we're going by the students who are applying to our schools, and that's how we determine the schools to build. And we also take those students from elementary. We would hope to retain a good majority of our Catholic students to move them into secondary through all our transition programs. But we also know that Catholic high schools are also attractive to non-Catholics, and we must admit them if they want to come. We cannot just say if you're not, like how we can in elementary school. So if you're asking, we're building for the people who are in our schools and projected to come to our schools from elementary, knowing that 30 to 40% currently in Milton, and I may be wrong, Fred, you probably have a better handle on open access, in Milton are non-Catholics in our secondary schools.
Through Madam Chair, the only thing I would add to that is, in our numbers, they're a little bit on the higher side, but that's not to say that some of the students that are coming from the public system are not Catholic right holders as well. There is that diversity where they're not necessarily coming to our schools for whatever reason at the elementary panel, but they may come back. So, you know, for us to really know what the division is, like admittedly, there are some areas that are more prevalent in having non-Catholics attending our secondary panel. That's a fact. They're not necessarily not Catholic. They're just, a lot of them are coming from the public board, so.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it. Are we mandated to build our high schools to the maximum capacity? Or if we're discussing this planning document with the public board at the same time, we project to have X thousand high school students coming from our schools, we're building a school for that size, therefore the public board would plan to build a public school the size large enough to accommodate that 40% or odd that aren't coming from our feeder schools.
Through Madam Chair, the baseline policy, I would say, for any school board when building is we're not building to peak, we're building to sustainable yield. So we don't want to build to that highest level as to what we expect schools to attain in terms of enrollment. We're always anticipating the use of portables. We're always anticipating that will be a reality because we don't want to get into that predicament. We don't want to have an over-reliance on a constituency that may change with the market changing. So that's why when we had the last board meeting, we were discussing when we're projecting for new secondary schools or things of that nature, the adjustment factors that we put in for non-Catholics is tapered down quite significantly than what we're seeing already in our schools because we don't want to have an over-reliance on that. We want to make sure that what's transferring into our system is in fact the bubble that's coming from our elementary students. That's the best indicator of what's to come. We should have consideration for what we'll get from the public board, but as I said, we taper it down just to be careful to the not overbuilding, especially at the secondary panel.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. You have nothing else? Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead, Fred.
Perhaps one last thing, we do have the website that's live now, so feel free to peruse. We'll be updating everything, all the projects are there. If your constituency has any questions or wants to know more, please direct them to the website. We want to start getting some traffic, that's not just planning services looking at it, so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, that was excellent. All right, trustees, 11.1, minutes of the April 10th, 2018 committee meeting. At 11.2, minutes of the April 9th, 2018 CPIC meeting. We have correspondence from Mrs. Waddick and Mrs. Lorenko. The open